Welcome back to the fast break. I got your girl Mpumi, Nompumelelo Ramatocha, and Koketso on the other side. How long has it been, fam? How you guys doing? How long has it been?
I'm good. Why didn't you say my surname? Do you
Hey,
not know
dog,
how to pronounce
sometimes it be tripping me up, man. Sometimes it be tripping me up. Can't do that to you on the air. How you ladies doing?
We're
Good.
good,
It's exciting
Brian.
to be back. Season 3.
Right? We're on our third season now. It's been a bit of a sabbatical, but there is a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on in the world right now as far as basketball is concerned. And I think we'll take it easy. We'll start slow and ease our way into it before we get into that franchise that's falling apart. But first things first, Bumia, I know you caught that jab. First things first, I want to get straight into what is going on with the Gotham Cape Town Tigers, man. I know they've had a lot of things going on in the offseason, right? They've been ramping up their preseason games, they've been ramping up their roster, the standard procedure, and they've had a lot of things going on this. And Bumia, I know you're quite close to the game of basketball at BAL and not necessarily the franchise, but you know a lot about what's going on. So obviously you'll be able to lead us through this. And I know they had a friendly recently in Pumi. Their last friendly was against the NBA Academy, but before them they had a few games. How did they do in those couple of games? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so before they played the NBA Academy last week, they had the South African qualifiers. So that was there were only 3 teams that took part in the South African qualifiers, and Tigers came out on top. They looked better from the start. Like you said, they've beefed up their roster a little bit. I am a huge fan of Raphael Putney. He's added like this maturity and leadership to this group of guys.
Yeah, and to add to what you said in Boomi, right? They like the roster changed, but also coaching wise, that also changed. And shout
Right.
out
Yeah.
exactly. So, and we see a huge improvement. I think what stood out, for me was the fact that I don't think any of our local teams match up to the Cape Town Tigers, right? And we no, it's not a jab. It's not,
And it's not even tough to say. It's not even tough to
yeah,
historically
it's just
they
an
have not.
observation. It's just an observation. Like from what I saw, none of our teams really match up to that level. And because I mean, the Cape Town Tigers are the only team in the country that's like professional. So all the players that play for that team are literally just playing basketball for, to make a living.
Sorry to interrupt you, right, Kosi, because I think there's two important points you made there. First things first, no team matches up in the country. How weird is it to be, no offense to these guys, I love them to death, to be the Geordie Nuggets where you used to win everything by just showing up. You would arrive and that tournament is yours, that game, whatever it is, whatever's happening, you're going to win. Now things are different, man. Now they're on the other side of that, and where they would be the ones making the super team, they would be the ones getting all the best players wanting to play for the same team. Now they're gonna deal with that, but now it comes a little bit of American drip and drab here and there, and some African players. It must be tough to be those guys right now. I don't know how.
But
It's a game of basketball, right? You do what you can to get better, but it must be a bitter pill to swallow.
yeah, it's fair, right? But it's also good for SA basketball because I feel like we were comfortable. We had a ceiling. And now with the Cape Town Tigers coming into this country, there's a higher ceiling. So now we can actually improve. Our level of basketball can actually improve and match up to the Tigers, and then hopefully, I don't know, just get better and better every year.
Even at a young age, right? You can now see yourself, or you can see people that you can rub shoulders with regularly playing in the BL, the best basketball competition on the
Yeah.
continent, and you can kind of see yourself with an avenue to get there, right? I know the Cape Town Tigers aren't stingy with giving guys opportunities. They're very generous with giving South African guys specifically an opportunity to play, calling them out, giving them a chance to run with the guys. And I like that about them, right? They're not necessarily just gatekeeping it to who they want or gatekeeping it to obviously we know the owner or the group of owners are American. They aren't saying, yeah, let's get a bunch of Americans in here and go, because obviously that'll make them better immediately. But they're kind of sharing the wealth and also developing
Yeah.
the basketball in South Africa. So you make a very good point there, because they actually are focused on that as well. But they literally are, in my opinion, the only actual professional organization in the country, just by how they are managed, just by how they are prepared. They're also prepared a whole lot more than they've ever prepared now. Like Nkumi said, they've had a bunch of friendlies, a bunch of scrimmages with the best teams in the country. Obviously, that was qualifiers, but now even before the BAL, and I think that's what they might have lacked, right? Where they would only play against South African competition and blow us out, and now they play against guys who are the best on the continent. They're actually making an actual effort to play against those guys before the tournament, which can only make them better. And I think that's going to be good. I think they have a game coming up now, I guess, against one of the better teams on the continent, right?
Yeah, so they have a game coming up against Petro. I think Petro came second in the BAL last year. So they're going to be
And
making the trip down here to play against the Cape Town Tigers. So that's going to be really exciting. And I think just to go back a little bit, you talked about how they've elevated this year, and not just in their preparation. Koki mentioned it. Getting Flush is a big deal. I might be a little biased because I've worked with him, but he's a really good coach, and you can see the difference in the way that Tigers are playing basketball, right? The way they're executing on the offensive end. Now you can see the possessions where they have long stretches of like offensive execution. They're getting really good shots. They're making the extra pass, that sort of thing. And defensively, the intensity is just different, right? They've upped
Yeah.
it. They've gotten better. So it's cool to see them get better on multiple levels. So they're getting better in terms of players and personnel. They're getting better in terms of coaching, and then they're getting better in how they're preparing.
yeah, exactly. To add on to that, I think that Petro will be the ultimate test for them because, like I said, our local teams don't really match up to that level because, again, our level has been, stagnant, but also they are not full-time professional players. So with Petro being there, a BAL finalist team, it should be a good matchup. And the fact that, the Cape Town Tigers lost to Petro in the last season of the BAL, and the score was 90-61. It's like, shit, 29 points.
Blowout, huh?
You know what I mean? So it would be a good measurement to see how they've, progressed since they've met them. And it's exciting for us fans, honestly.
Man, it is amazing. Just the atmosphere. Mandeville's not a very big venue, but it's packed. Like there are people coming into the game and it's still packed and people are standing and stuff. And it's created such an incredible buzz around South African basketball. People go and watch games, but a lot of the time people go and watch games if they're involved. And now you're seeing people like taking time out of their schedules, their days, whatever, their lives.
100%,
to like,
100%,
like, oh, I'm going to go watch Tigers play. And it's really what we needed as well for the environment.
Yeah, so the culture of basketball is really growing. So shout out to platforms like Basketball Sheriff and Fastbreak. We're growing the culture.
I was about to say, Mpumi was at the game, dog, and it was a packed arena. Why we got a panelist there? We can't even get a media pass. Anyway, we'll discuss that in the back.
What?
So here's my thing, right? I'm saying. So I agree with you guys, right? The personnel change as far as the head coach, we've discussed it previously, and we obviously aren't in the organization. We aren't behind the scenes. We don't know what goes on there. But from the outside looking in, we all have basketball minds. We've been around the game long enough. We could see that there was some kind of disconnect. What we know about Flush Ngwenya is that he's arguably the most respected basketball coach in the country. He's been at the highest of levels. He's played in many countries, many international tournaments. So I probably think that he's one of the guys you would look to be able to control players, for lack of a better word, but also command respect. So I really do like that addition. The issue I have, and obviously I'm not in the organization, I'm not in the front office, so it's not up to me, but I've never liked teams that chop and change this regularly, right? Obviously, the team is trying to get better every single year. They're trying to add talent as regularly as possible. But it kind of feels like every 3 or 4 months, there's a new player coming onto the Cape Town Tigers. And I just kind of, and I think I've said this before, it's tough to not question the consistency or the chemistry or the gender of these guys if every other day there's another starter caliber player coming in. That's the one issue I would have. But if you're going to beat the best, you need to be as good as the best for starters. You got to get better. So I kind of understand it as well. But it would be not. I think you guys have seen this Netflix documentary with the 2008 basketball USA men's. They were losing because they would put teams together. They only started winning properly when they had a 4 or 5 year program. But it's understandable. It's a new league, but that's just my point. Go ahead and do
I was about to say with the Tigers. I mean, they still new. They still finding their groove. Once they've come up with like a core team, that's when they'll
100%.
Start being consistent and stuff. But that I don't mind them switching and changing where they see fit because it creates.
That's what a team is supposed to do. Of course, teams do that all the time.
Yeah. So you have your core guys. So as much as there's been changes from who they look like in the beginning, they've had to get better as they go. They've had to see that. And when you look at like who anchors the team, you have Peter, who's been there from the very beginning. Evans has been there a really long time. And it's great to see then the retention of Lebesa and Nati, who are making an impact coming off the bench. So you do have that kind of core. Billy Preston's back as well. So as much as like their starters coming and going, there's been a consistent amount and enough consistency that the organization continues to grow.
That's absolutely fair, right? If you're going, like I said, if you want to beat the best, you got to get better. And another part of that is, as an organization, is making tough decisions, knowing that as good as you think you are, the group you have might not be good. And no one is playing to qualify. No one is playing to get to the final. They're trying to win a championship. And we could see it last year. Like you said, losing by 30 points to the team they hosted over the December period, you want to get better. No matter, you can train your hearts out, but at the end of the day, talent and skill matters. And it's naturally just better to bring that in when you can versus, trying to develop it over a couple of years. Because the truth about the Cape Town tie, most teams in the BAL kind of win now. You need to do everything you possibly can to win now once the league is solidified and the league is set, so you know that you've either got a spot or not, as opposed to trying to plan for 3, 4, 5 years in advance. So I kind of get that. Real quick though, off the top of your head, you mentioned what's coming up next, but they've also had a couple of games recently, right? And we had a media pass, we didn't go to, but whatever. We'll talk about that offline. What are your thoughts about the game against the NBA Academy? How do you feel about that?
Man, so I think both games were incredible, right? So
Wait,
the first
Oh, it was 2 games.
there were 2 games. So the first game was kind of a
we would
closed
know
door game.
if we're a media pass, but whatever.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
The first one was kind of a closed door game. And Tigers won that one. And what I liked about that game.
Oh, wait, this is interesting. I don't think a lot of people know this. When was that?
So that was a couple of days before the public game.
Okay.
And in that first game, it was really interesting. What I really liked was down the stretch, you had closing out the game were Lebesas Kumbuzo Nati, Billy Preston, and Peter Prinsloo. Because Evans didn't play in that first game, and then Putney and Deng both fouled out. So with 2 minutes left, with the game tied, Tigers, again, back to the offensive execution, there was a lot of composure, and they won. And they won by quite a bit. So that was a really good game. I think that, people are so hung up about the result of this past game, but both these games are about both these teams getting better.
On that point, sorry. Preseason basketball, obviously you want to win every single game you can, right? But preseason basketball is not dedicated or designed for that. You're trying to figure your team out and figure the other guys out. So they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Exactly, right? So they're going through a process and doing what they're supposed to be doing. But the level of basketball that was there. And I was
about to ask, So
I have to talk about one kid in particular, right? Ruben Chimelo is incredible to watch play. This young man is the future of continental basketball. He had his first stint with the senior Nigerian national team a couple of months ago. And so he's already stepping into that. He's 18.
How old is the kid?
He's 18.
Wow.
And so you see that athleticism. It's just such an athletic kid. He just had 2 official visits. He did an official visit to Tennessee for the Vols, and then he did an official visit to the Gators. So it's going to be interesting. He should be making his decision in the next couple of months. It's going to be interesting to see where he plays college ball. I'm going to be a fan of that team. Whatever team that he goes to, I'm definitely going to watch that team for the next couple of years.
Mpumi, do you think the Cape Town Tigers against NBA Academy, do you think that was a good matchup for the Tigers or for both teams?
I think it was a great matchup for the Tigers. I think that those young men play fearless, right? If you look at the way that the NBA Academy guys play, it doesn't matter who's in front of them. They're just playing. And I think Tigers needed that kind of challenge as well. I think sometimes there are teams, even in the local space, where players respect the Tigers brand and respect who Tigers are and where they've been. Whereas these young men who are looking at going to the NBA, right? And he's thinking, I'm 18 years old. In 2 years, I'm going to have to play against someone like this, better than this, whatever. Right? So those guys are playing with like zero fear.
I have something to prove. What a chip on the shoulder, sure.
Yeah. And then
that's a bit tough, man. Go ahead, Kate. Go ahead.
No, I was about to ask Mpumi as well. Like, so for our audience, like people who don't know, what is the NBA Academy?
Yeah, so the NBA Academy the NBA have a couple of academies across the world. So the one in Africa is, I want to say, based in Senegal. I'm pretty sure it's Senegal, but it's a bunch of players from around the continent who have been picked up with the purpose of advancing them through basketball and through school. They're all high school players, so between like 15 and 18 years old. And so it's a big privilege for a lot of these guys because they also have an opportunity to play around the world. So they did this South Africa tour, but you'll find they do tours everywhere else again, and then they have the NBA Academy games where they play against the academies from, you know, other continents. But yeah, these kids are picked from NBA events, BWB, you know, scouts for the NBA. So this is literally the creme de la creme of high school basketball players on the continent.
Do we know of any professionals who are from the NBA Academy?
None off the top of my head. I know
maybe
the
not
academy,
the academy, but BWB. There's a lot of guys from BWB, right? I know Joel Embiid was BWB, Georgie Dale was BWB. A lot of them are BWB, which is kind of the same program, right?
Yeah, so the academy hasn't existed that long. That I think you can expect that kind of return. So in the next couple of years, you're going to see that. You're going to see a bunch of guys who've been through the academy. You know, there's one South African kid at the academy. It's his first year there. You know, he's not really playing that much, but I think once he starts to kind of adjust to that level and everything, it's going to be interesting to watch how Connor grows in that environment.
And how can we keep up with the academy? Sorry, Brian.
Go ahead.
How can we keep up with the academy? Like, how do we, you know, stay up
different avenues? I think it's great to follow them on the socials. They always, they post really well. They have a couple of highlights up. The NBA Africa page have a couple of highlights up from the games and the South Africa tour.
So Mbumi, you made a few very good points, right? Well, maybe not points, but I know a lot of guys are only focused on the second game from this weekend. I'm sorry, before we move on, I know we're pressed for time. People are focused on the game we got to see where the Tigers lost. Listen, these are the best young players our continent has to offer. So they aren't scrubs, right? They aren't just nobody. These are the best players who've gone to academy and have gotten good and have gotten better at their craft. So, like I said, it's not a bunch of scrubs. The Cape Town Tigers, sure, you'd expect this and that from them, but again, they are in their growing pace. They're trying to get better and better and better. And the difference between the NBA Academy and the Tigers is that the Tigers want to clear out the bench. They want to get the guys at the bottom of the bench to play a whole lot more minutes to see what it is, to see how they can get more comfortable. So I'm not so concerned about the win-loss column, but the fact that the Cape Town Tigers and the NBA Africa, right, are bringing all these kids in is huge for the continent, dude. Like, it's really giving kids an opportunity to be seen a whole lot more often. And forget the kids. There has never been this much exposure to South African basketball before the Cape Town Tigers existed. They've actually been big for the country. They've been big for the
black. Don't say ever.
Yeah.
You're definitely too young to say ever.
What
I've read. I got a khalima in the fact that, you know, it was a thriving South African league in the 90s. So what the Cape Town Tigers are doing is amazing. It's incredible. But my point of correction is that there has been a culture of basketball in this country. You know, it didn't begin in our generation. They were...
Sure. I think it started going down in our generation, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there were PBL players in the past that were international players. People were coming down from all around the world to play in South Africa. So it's definitely back to elevating the status of basketball, which is incredible.
Just what it hasn't been that over the past couple. Fair enough. You make a very, very good point.